Imagine it is 1.5 million years ago. You are hungry, the kind of hungry that makes you stupid, and a small brown bird lands on a branch right next to your face, and it starts screaming at you. Not a song, not a warning, something else. It flies a little way off, then comes back, then flies off again. Like it wants you to follow. So here is the strange part. You follow a wild bird through the trees, and it leads you straight to honey. Now stop and think about how insane that is. A wild animal walked up to a human and offered to show it where food was on purpose, and the human understood. That partnership still exists today. In parts of Africa, people call this bird with a specific sound, and it answers. It might be the only wild animal on Earth that talks to us as equals, and it may have been doing it since before we were even fully human. So the real question is not how did ancient humans discover honey? The question is, did we find it, or did something show us? And why does your brain still lose its mind over the exact same sweet thing 1 million years later? Let's get into it. To understand this story, you have to understand something about the world our ancestors lived in. It had almost no sugar in it. Think about that for a second. No shops, no candy, no bread, no fruit sitting around all year long. For most of human history, sweetness was almost impossible to find. And that matters a lot more than it sounds. Because your brain runs on sugar, it is the single most expensive organ in your body. It is only about 2% of your weight, but it burns around 1/5 of your energy. It is burning through fuel right now, just sitting there, reading this. And for your ancestors, that hunger was the entire game. Every single day ask the same quiet question. Where does the next burst of energy come from? Miss too many answers, and you simply do not survive. So your ancestors were not just hungry, they were hunting energy constantly. So imagine you are an early human, walking miles every day, hunting, foraging, always a little bit hungry. Your whole life is a slow search for enough energy to keep going. And then one day, you find it. Honey. Here is a fact that reframes this entire video. Honey is the most energy-dense food in all of nature, not one of the most gram for gram. Nothing else in the wild even comes close. One anthropologist who studies this described it perfectly. She called honey the original energy bar. Dense, sweet, loaded with fast sugar, with a little fat and protein from the bee larva mixed in. For a tired body and a hungry brain, this was pure rocket fuel. Nothing else they could find came even close. Not the meat, not the roots, not the berries. Honey was in a category all of its own. To find it was to hit the jackpot. A single good hive could feed you for days. No wonder we could not leave it alone. So now you understand the stakes. This was not a treat. This was maybe the single most valuable food a human being could find on the entire planet, which creates one very obvious problem. If honey is that good, every animal on Earth wants it too. And the bees really do not want to share. So how do you actually get it? You are a soft, slow, easily stung creature, standing in front of a living fortress of angry insects. Does that sound like a fair fight to you? It is not, and this is exactly where the story gets strange, because our ancestors did not solve this problem alone. They had help, and the help came with wings. Let me introduce you to the strangest business partner in human history. It is a small, plain, gray-brown bird. Honestly, you would walk right past it. Its name is the Honeyguide, and it does something no other wild animal on Earth does. It goes looking for humans on purpose to work with them. Here is how the whole thing works. The Honeyguide flies around the savannah, and it finds bee nests. It can actually smell the wax. It knows exactly where the honey is hidden. There is just one problem. It cannot get in. It is a tiny bird, facing the same fortress of stinging bees you were. It cannot open the hive, and it cannot survive the swarm, but it knows someone who can. So the bird goes and finds a human being. It flies up close, chatters loudly, flicks its white tail feathers, and darts off in one direction. Then it comes back and does it all again. Follow me, follow me. And the people who live alongside these birds understand exactly what it means. So they follow. The bird leads them tree by tree, straight to the hidden nest. Then the humans do the thing the bird cannot. They calm the bees with smoke, they break open the hive, they take the honey, and they leave the wax and the larvae behind. For the bird, everybody wins. Now, you might be thinking, okay, animals help humans all the time. Dogs, horses, but those are animals we tamed over thousands of years. We bred them, we raised them, we fed them. The Honeyguide is completely different. Nobody tamed it. It is fully, totally wild. It could ignore us forever, and it chooses not to. There are only a tiny handful of relationships like this on the entire planet. A wild animal and a human, choosing to work together, no leash, no cage, no training, and this one might be the oldest of them all. Just sit with how strange that is for a second. Now here is the part that should genuinely stop you in your tracks. This is not a case of a human training a bird, and it is not a bird just copying a human. They actually talk to each other. In Mozambique, honey hunters from the Yao people make one very specific sound when they want to go hunting, a kind of rolling trill, followed by a grunt, and when they make that exact sound, the honey guides come to them. The birds have learned that this particular noise means a human is ready to work, and it gets even more specific than that. In a different region, with different people, the humans use a completely different call, a whistle, instead of a trill, and the local birds there have learned that one instead. Do you understand what that actually means? The birds are learning our signals, region by region, almost like local accents. And this is not a warm story with no evidence behind it. Researchers went out and measured it. When the honey hunters used the right call, they were far more likely to actually find a bee's nest. Using the bird roughly tripled their chances. The Honeyguide is not decoration on this story. The bird is the difference between coming home with honey and coming home with nothing. Let me ask you something. When was the last time a wild animal, one you never fed and never trained, walked up to you and asked you to follow it somewhere? For almost all of us, the answer is never. But for the people who live beside these birds, it happens all the time. The first outsider to even write this down was a missionary over 400 years ago. He watched a little bird eating the wax from his candles and slowly realized the locals had been working with it for generations. Oh, and one myth I have to clear up before we go on. You may have heard that the honey guide also leads a honey badger to hives. Cute story. A bird and a tiny furry tank working as a team. The only problem, nobody has ever actually proven it. The famous videos of it turned out to be staged. So as far as we really know, the Honeyguide has exactly one reliable partner on Earth, us. But here's the question anthropologists genuinely argue about. How old is this partnership? Because honeyguides have lived in Africa for millions of years, and so have the bees, and the two skills the bird needs from us, controlling fire and using tools. Our ancestors have had those for well over 1 million years, which means this deal between a bird and a human might be older than our species itself. Sit with that for a moment. There may have been a version of you that was not quite human yet, standing in the tall grass, listening to a bird chatter, and making the choice to trust it. That is not instinct. That is a relationship. Now, I know exactly what the skeptical part of your brain is doing right now. It is saying, okay, nice story, but how do we actually know ancient humans cared this much about honey? That is fair, so let me show you the proof. And the proof is painted on a wall in Spain, in a place called the Spider Caves. There is a painting in there. It is around 8,000 years old, and it is the oldest surviving image we have of a human being gathering honey. Here is what it shows. A single human figure hanging off the side of a cliff, climbing what looks like a rope or a long ladder of woven vines, way up off the ground. And remember, no safety rope, no helmet, no hospital waiting at the bottom, just a plant vine and a very strong opinion about dessert. In one hand, a container to carry the honey home, and all around this tiny person, dots, dozens and dozens of them. The artist drew a whole swarm of bees, circling the climber, and you have to appreciate what that artist was doing. They did not have to draw the bees that big. They chose to because they wanted whoever saw this to feel the danger. This was a person thousands of years ago saying, look what we do for this, look what it costs us. And that is the detail that honestly gets me, because think about the decision this painting represents. Some ancient human looked up at a cliff, wrapped in a screaming cloud of stinging insects, holding nothing but a rope made of plants, and a basket and thought to themselves, yeah, worth it. That is how good honey was. People were willing to climb a cliff into a cloud of bees and risk falling to their death for a taste of it. And they did it so often, and it mattered to them so much, that they painted it onto a wall so nobody would forget this was not a snack. This was one of the most important things in their entire world, important enough to die for, and important enough to become art. Okay, so far this is a beautiful story. A bird and a human working together across 1,000,000 years, trusting each other. It sounds like a friendship, but I promised you the honest version of this. So here it is. It was never really a friendship. It was a deal, and like most deals, somebody was quietly getting cheated. Remember, the Honeyguide leads the human to the hive, expecting a reward, the wax, the larvae, the leftovers. That is the entire arrangement. The bird always holds up its end, but the humans do not always hold up theirs. Among some honey hunters, there is a much darker habit. When they finish taking the honey, they do not always pay the bird. Sometimes they hide the wax, sometimes they bury it or burn it on purpose. And here is the cold logic behind it. A hungry bird is a motivated bird. If you never fully feed the Honeyguide, it stays hungry, and a hungry Honeyguide will keep guiding you again and again, hoping for a reward it does not always get. Think about that for a second. The humans figured out how to keep the bird working for them by keeping it a little bit desperate. That is not a fairy tale. That is management. So the Honeyguide keeps its side of the bargain perfectly and trusts that this time it will finally get paid. Sometimes it does, sometimes it does not. And it comes back anyway, which tells you something a little bit sad. The bird needs this deal more than we do. So which is it? Is this a story about a beautiful partnership between two different species? Or is it a story about a clever ape that found a wild animal it could use and quietly rigged the deal in its own favor? Here is the uncomfortable answer. It is both, and honestly, that might be the most human thing in this entire video. We do not just cooperate. We cooperate and we calculate. At the exact same time, we made a genuine partner out of a wild bird, and then we learned exactly how much we could take from it before it would walk away. And the Honeyguide still shows up, still trusts the arrangement, still leads us to the gold, because even a bad deal is better than no honey at all. The bird knows that, and so did we. So let's go all the way back to the question we started with. How did ancient humans discover honey? And by now, you can probably feel that the question is almost too small, because the better question is, what did honey do to us? And this is where it stops being a story about food and quietly becomes a story about you. Here is an idea that some serious scientists now take seriously. Honey did not just feed early humans, it may have helped build us. Remember, your brain is an energy monster. To grow a brain that big, the kind that makes art and plans for the future, and follows a bird on a hunch, you need a huge amount of dense energy, more than leaves, more than most meat, more than almost anything you can find out in the wild. And there was one food sitting out there that was pure concentrated energy: honey. Once our ancestors had stone tools to crack open the hives and fire to calm the bees, they could unlock that energy in a way that no other animal on Earth could. And some researchers think that extra fuel may have been part of what let the human brain grow as large as it did. Sit with that for just a second. The brain you are using right now to understand this exact sentence may be the size it is, partly because a hungry ancestor, an incredibly long time ago, decided to follow a small brown bird to a beehive. And that leads us to the very last piece, the part you can actually feel in your own body. Every great ape eats honey. Chimps, gorillas, orangutans, all of them go out of their way for it, which means the love of sweetness is not a new thing. It is older than humans. It is one of the oldest cravings that exists. So the next time you are standing in a shop, staring at something sweet, knowing you probably should not, and reaching for it anyway, do not be so hard on yourself. That pull you feel is not weakness. It is a signal your body has been sending for over 1,000,000 years. Find the sweetness. It means survival. The craving is not the problem. The craving is ancient, and for almost all of history, it was right. The problem is that we finally built a world where the sweetness is everywhere, and it costs us almost nothing. No cliff, no bees, no bird, just a shelf. Think about how strange that reversal really is. The thing that once needed a bird, a cliff, and a real chance of dying now needs about 4 steps and a bit of loose change. We did not just find the honey, we drowned the entire world in it. And your brain, the very one that followed a bird a million years ago, still lights up every single time. It cannot tell the difference between a wild hive on a cliff and a checkout counter. To your brain, sugar still means one thing. You are going to survive. That is why it is so hard to say no. You are not fighting a snack. You are fighting a million years of instinct that was almost always right. The bird is gone. The cliff is gone. But the craving stayed. Your ancestors risked their lives following a wild bird, climbing into a swarm for a single taste of the thing you can now buy for pocket change and throw half of it in the bin. So maybe the Honeyguide was not only leading humans to honey, maybe in a strange way, it was leading us all the way here. To a species with a big hungry brain and a sweet tooth it can no longer switch off. If this changed the way you look at the food in your hand right now, share it with someone who has a sweet tooth they can never quite explain. Now they will know the truth. It is not them, it is 1.5 million years of memory, and I will see you in the next one.